Just going to start recording. Hi everyone, welcome to our Healthy Lunchbox Tips for School and Kinder Starters webinar. My name is Alyssa and I'll be your host today. I'd like to start out by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land we're meeting on. For me in Monash, that's the Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Bunurong people. We recognise their continuing connection to land and waterways, and we pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend this to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We're so glad you can join us. Thank you for making the time. I'm about to introduce Leanne, our speaker. After her presentation, there'll be time for some questions. So if you have any questions that occur to you throughout the presentation, feel free to pop them in the Q&A section and we'll get to them at the end. But without further ado, please join me in welcoming Leanne Elliston, Senior Dietitian at Nutrition Australia.
Thank you, Alyssa, and thank you to the City of Monash for having me speak to you all today about lunchboxes. And today we're going to be focusing on lunchbox or school starters. So our kindies in particular that have just headed off to school, and it's early days, still very exciting, and where parents are starting to realise this is an everyday thing. And that we're going to pack these lunch boxes and get onto it. So yeah, I'll go through a little bit of some things to think about when we are packing our children's lunch boxes, particularly for this particular age group. So just a bit of background. I am an accredited practicing dietitian, have been for 25 years, and I also head up the ACT division of Nutrition Australia. Healthy Lunchbox Week happened last week, or rather it's called National Lunchbox Week, happened last week, and yeah, so lunchboxes is very much front of mind for me right now. Before I go on, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that I'm on here in the beautiful Ngunnawal country, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. All right, so for those of you who don't know much about Nutrition Australia, we're a health promotion charity. Our main aim is working with the Australian community, various communities, different sectors in the community to build nourishing and equitable food environments. We believe everyone is entitled to eat well, and we feel that we are connected through food as well. So food's such a big part of our lives. National Lunchbox Week. It's a campaign that occurs at the beginning of the school year. So we usually wait until children get back to school before the week begins. In some schools, it's the first week back. In other states, it's the second or third week back. And it's all about supporting families, schools, early childhood settings in particular, to make lunchboxes enjoyable, nourishing, pressure-free for everyone. And we do have a hashtag that we use. So if you want to jump online and check out some of the posts that came out last week and get some inspiration, you can go there as well. All right, so today I'm here to talk to you about all the considerations when it comes to packing a lunchbox for our littlies, particularly those who might be starting out at school. Some of you may have children that are in an early childhood education and care setting as well and need to pack a lunchbox for them. So it really there's a bit of focus, particularly on children under 5 that I'll be talking about today. And we're going to think about how we can tailor lunch boxes for children's different sensory variations. So all children have different tastes, apply their sense to food in different ways. And we're going to explore what that looks like and how we can pick up on that and tailor accordingly. I'll go through a little bit around nutrition labels, just because I know a lot of people ask me around, well, what do I look for if I'm going out to buy something to pop in the lunchbox? What are some of those key things I need to look out for to make sure there's some nourishing foods? Because you would have all probably seen a lot of the media that came out last week in relation to particularly toddler foods and all of those hidden things that the manufacturers are not telling you. And so how we go about reading through and looking that, because it can be a little bit challenging, and there are a lot of packaged foods out there that can be quite deceptive when it comes to so-called, claims and so on within those packets. So it's very good to just be mindful of that. because at the same time, you know, we're still going to lean on packaged foods. They are convenient, they can be useful, and some of them can actually be fairly decent. And finally, I'm going to finish up with the safe lunchboxes. So considerations for keeping our lunchboxes safe from bacterial contamination and bacterial growth, and also thinking about allergies and how we manage those situations where our children might have significant allergies, and how we need to work with the schools in that respect. All right, so as Alyssa said, if any questions come to mind as we're going through this session, please just pop them in the chat box. Or even if you have any comments or anything, every now and then I'll just throw out a question for you all. And if you just pop it in the chat box, that's really great, because it just gives that nice little element of engagement as well. And always nice to share. So if you've got some tips and ideas that work for you, pop it in the chat box, because there's so much more that people are doing and some great ideas that people have. I can't capture all of it. All right. So we know that kids who are going to eat well, they're going to have sustained energy, they're going to be more alert, they're going to be able to concentrate and learn and engage at school, and become better learners. So of course, you know, thinking about what we nourish our bodies is really important, because it will nourish our brains and our ability to concentrate and get through a busy school day, and also keep up with our friends playing and so on. And when it comes to lunch boxes, you know, this is sort of what we all want. We want them to be nutritious, obviously, to provide the nourishment our children need to learn and to grow and get through their day. Convenience is a big factor as well. So, I mean, particularly when we have those busy mornings, you just got to get that lunchbox packed and get out the door in time. And it can take some time planning and prepping lunchboxes. Budget friendly, I think, not only in today's society, but always. We want to make sure that what we're putting in the lunchbox isn't costing an arm and a leg. You know, it's not so expensive. We're looking for cheap shortcuts where we can, but not affecting nutrition either. And at the end of the day, they've got to be enjoyable. So if they're not enjoyable, we're not going to eat them. The children aren't going to eat them, eat the food. And we want it to be an enjoyable experience as well. So it's not always about the food. It's about the experience of sitting down and eating that meal through the lunchbox, and that social engagement as well that eating together brings, and talking about the food. So enjoyment, when we talk about enjoyment in food, it's not just about the food, it's enjoying the experience as well. So I'm going to jump through straight up key steps when it comes to packing a lunchbox. So this is just your little mind, set in your mind every time when you're packing a lunchbox. So you're covering these key steps. So the first step, wrong way, is think about a main item. So it's kind of like the main event, the main lunch product. Whether it's a sandwich or it's a wrap, it could be a bread roll. There's lots of pretty cool different shapes and sizes of bread rolls now that you can play around with, which just provide a little bit of variation. You might opt for something that's not bread-based. It could be like a salad, a pasta salad. You could go with last night's leftover frittata. Making up sushi, I admire those parents who do sushi. I've tried and failed multiple times, but if you can pull it off, good on you. And probably the night before is my recommendation, but usually kids, they love it too, because it's just a fun food to eat. Rice paper rolls are really good too. So again, last night's salad, or what if you had like a stir fry or something, you could chop it up and put it in a rice paper roll. Believe it or not, that actually tastes really good. So thinking about that main item to begin with, so the main event. And then always good to throw in some sort of fruit or vegetable snack. So there's always got to be some kind of fruit around the house, whether it's an apple, a banana, it could be a mandarin, so the whole fruit. Chopping up vegetables. We love our veggie sticks. Again, a bit of effort required there. I do like not necessarily, those baby carrots are great, but they're a bit pricey. I usually just get the small carrot. I get a bag of small carrots, which are quite good, and my children used to love just crunching on those. Or the little cucumbers are fantastic. Another cool thing to think about is your canned options. Nothing wrong with the canned options, particularly at the end of the week when you've run out of fresh food, or there's just not much good stuff in season. So those little tubs of fruit are fine if you get them in the natural juice. I also like canned vegetables, so canned corn or corn spears, because they're just a great finger food. They were a big feature in my children's lunchbox. You can get the little canned legumes as well. So those little mini cans of legumes that have flavors added to them. They're delicious too. So yeah, thinking beyond just apples and bananas, but thinking, other vegetable options as well, as I guess as a snack is a really good idea. So you got that color in there as well. And the next thing we want to aim for is think about a little second snack. So this could be, it could be like a little mini muffin, maybe a cheese stick, some crackers and cheese, or one of those little yogurt pouches. And that's where I think, some sort of a dairy type option or a little baked good might be nice as well. And that sort of rounds up the lunchbox beautifully. And finally, don't forget the drink. So whether it's always a drink bottle, whatever the children's favorite drink bottle might be, filled with water. I do love drink bottles nowadays, where they're metal and they're insulated and they can keep the cold. Like, oh gosh, I would have loved that as a child. I had the old crappy plastic ones that would just go to room temperature in no time. Or another drink could be like your little poppers, particularly the milk poppers. So just the plain milk poppers are actually quite good, and you can freeze those and pop them in your lunchbox. And then when they thaw out, they become like this lovely milk slushy, which is delicious. So they're your 4 key steps. Just think of those 4 key things. You've got a main item, you've got some sort of fruit or vegetable, another little snacky thing in there that might be what's been baked on the weekend, and make sure there's that drink as well. Pretty simple. All right. And then we're thinking about that variety across the lunchbox, because thinking about what they're eating during that time is really about 30% of their overall dietary food intake. So it does actually make a difference what we're putting in that lunchbox, and they're eating that day in, day out, every day at school. So I want to try and get a little bit of variety there, so we're capturing the nutritional variation that their bodies need. So when I talk about variety, I think about foods that make us go, foods that make us grow, and foods that make us glow. It's a nice concept to remember, your go, grow, glow foods. And they're concepts that we can relate to. So go is as in playing and being active. Grow is quite obviously our children are growing. And the glow foods are those that keep us well. So your vitamins and antioxidants. So let's have a look at what those kinds of foods might look like. Oh, and you'll also notice that was a little prompt where I made a pulse to remind me that I've got these fact sheets available on the National Lunchbox Week website. So you'll see I'll highlight those fact sheets when they come up. So you can download those fact sheets and have them on hand, put them on the fridge when you're packing lunch boxes. Make sure your other half or grandparents, well-meaning aunties, uncles, they might have access to these as well. So let's go through our go, grow, glow foods. So the go foods, thinking the foods that give us energy, that help to keep us active during the day, but they're also the foods that give our brains energy to keep us alert as well. So mostly your carbohydrate type foods. So thinking about breads, going for your grainy breads, focaccia, Turkish bread, so many different bread options out there. I do love a flat bread too, and you can roll that up in all sorts of things. I love the little fruit muffin, the fruit buns. So like a hot cross bun. This time of year, you can get the hot cross buns with the fruit in them, ideally. Get so many variations of hot cross buns now. Muffins and bagels, pasta, noodles, rice. So those starchy foods, so they're the foods that give us the energy. Other great foods are quinoa, couscous, or even your crackers, just like crisp breads are fine, like your Vita Wheats. I've got here my little homemade pita crisps. I love these. So when you buy some flatbread and it's starting to get a little bit beyond its use-by date, just chop it up into pieces into the oven for only about 10 minutes or so on fairly low, moderate heat, and it comes out crispy, and they're just like chips, but it's made from bread. Beautiful. You could put some spices in there or some Parmesan cheese as well, which is quite yummy. So I love those things. So thinking that starchy sort of food is great. Then we've got our grow food. So these are the foods that are really important for children's growth. So they might have high in proteins, so support muscle growth, and high in calcium, so strengthen bones as well. So it's really our dairy and our meat and alternatives groups that are here. So thinking yogurt, cheese, even custard, that's still pretty nutritious. It's made from milk. The milk poppers are fantastic. If children can't tolerate milk, then they can have, say, soy alternatives, so a soy yogurt. For children that are lactose free, something I always like to remind families is that the hard cheese doesn't contain any lactose. So if you're getting like the hard tasty cheese sticks or just getting a block of cheese and cutting it up or slicing it, it's okay. It's lactose free. How can you tell? Look on the label and you'll see it's got 0 sugars or less than 1 gram per 100 grams. So it's practically lactose free. So don't waste your money on buying lactose free cheese. Yogurt, milk, on the other hand, will contain lactose. So if your child is lactose sensitive, choose the lactose free options of those. But otherwise, for the rest of us that tolerate dairy, go for it. Try to have some sort of dairy in the lunchbox if you can. Then there's the meat options, so meat or alternatives. So that can be whether it's chicken in the sandwich or some leftover roast lamb from the night before. You could, eggs are fantastic. I love hard-boiled eggs in a lunchbox or mashed up in a sandwich or a wrap are good. Those little tins of tuna, those little mini tins of tuna are great, but we've got to be mindful about opening. I'll talk about that shortly, how we open those. Little dips, hummus dips. So the legume-based dips are fabulous. So chickpea or kidney bean-based dips, because they do provide quite a good source of protein. Baked beans. Some kids like to just eat the cold baked beans straight out of the tin. I know my children used to. Making falafels or buying those falafels are a really good option as well. They're made from chickpeas. Even chopping up tofu and you could what do you call it? Marinate that and fry it, and that's actually really delicious. Some marinated tofu cubes. So all these options that you can go for. So often, some people might say to me, "Oh, but my child doesn't eat meat." Well, that's okay. They don't have to. There's so many alternatives they can have instead. And then, of course, our glow food. So this is the colourful foods, because with those colours comes the vitamins and the antioxidants and so on, and they're fun and enjoyable. So it could be your fruits or your vegetables, which I've already gone through some examples of that. So remember, one of those steps was to try and include some sort of fruity or veggie option. So that's your glow food. When it comes to the littlies, you'll notice, having it cut up is actually really quite important. A whole apple in a lunchbox for a littly can be quite challenging, particularly if their teeth are a little bit loose. There's many a teacher that will say that the children have lost their teeth in an apple. So yeah, chopping it up, using those soft, even those little tinned options, tinned fruits. Like I said, getting a big one and decanting it or buying those pre-packaged ones are quite good. Fruit purees are fine for children. Those squishy purees, again, in variations, so having different textures, not relying on them all the time, but they can be convenient. And of course, lots of different vegetable options as well. Again, those harder vegetables can be a little bit challenging for the little ones. So that's where I like those little corn spears are great, or moving more into those legume things that they can chew on, or the dips based on those sorts of foods. So some of the things we've got to think about when it comes to lunchboxes for children under 5. So I talked about those little tins of tuna or the tins of chickpeas, which I love, but they're pretty impossible to open for a small child. And teachers do get a little bit annoyed when they have to open everybody's can of something. So be mindful of what kind of container the food is in, if it is in something that they can open. Some of those little tins, you might have to open them up and then decant them in something so that they can easily access the food within. Finger foods are great. Most children are usually great when it comes to just picking up and eating the food, if it's sort of like that finger food size. So with a sandwich, this little guy is quite happy eating that big sandwich. But some children would prefer it if it was cut into fingers, or it could be cut into quarters. It's just a bit more easier and a bit less committal as well. So, you know, when you've got one little piece, you're like, oh yeah, I'll just eat that and enjoy that, and I don't have to feel like I need to eat the whole lot. So there's a bit of psychology around chopping things up into small pieces as well. Avoid overloading. So I've just talked about all the variation of different foods you could be putting in the lunchbox. Don't try and cover all of it. Keep it small, keep it within the portion that you think they can handle, and try not to overwhelm. When we overwhelm children with food, they're just like, oh, it's all too much, I can't decide, I won't have anything. So yeah, overloading can be quite burdensome, I think, for children, not knowing what to eat or whether to eat it at all. And plus, there's also a risk that you're going to have a lot of food wastage as well. So we don't want that. Always include familiar food. So the lunchbox isn't really the time to be starting new foods. So stuff that children are familiar with, particularly the school starters, you know, going to school or changing school can be quite a traumatic experience. It's this whole new environment that they're getting used to. And then if they get food that they're not used to as well, that just adds to the anxiety. So when they open their lunchbox and they see the food that they're familiar with, they know it, they know that you've put so much love and care into it, it's an extension to home and it makes them feel good inside. So food, as I always say, does more than nourish. You know, we're feeling good about it, and it can help to calm our anxious feelings as well. So bringing in those familiar foods that will help your child to feel comfortable where they are, and gives them that lovely link to home as well. Remember, providing a good enough lunchbox is fine. It does not need to be perfect. I can tell you that my children's lunchboxes were far from perfect when they were growing up. And, you know, and I was okay with that. But they were happy, they were enjoying their food, and that was the main thing. And there was variety. And sometimes if it's just a Vegemite sandwich, a cheese stick, and a piece of fruit, well, you know what? That's still a bit of variety there, and if they're going to enjoy it, that's really important. So don't feel like you've got to have some Insta-worthy, beautiful, colourful lunchbox all the time. Sometimes it's just not going to work anyway. Some food ideas for under 5. So thinking small pieces, sort of like fingery type food is what we like, and manageable. So some of the things that are cut up that we think, particularly when it comes to choking risks as well. So if you've got some little ones and their teeth are still a little bit wobbly or not quite coming through just yet, particularly their molars, always cut those harder things in half. So those sort of fruits with skins. So I'm thinking blueberries, or it could be grapes as well, that sometimes if their teeth aren't very well developed, it's hard for them to bite through, and then they can become a choking hazard. So I always like to cut those in half. Cherry tomatoes I'll cut in half. When it comes to hard, crunchy vegetables, you might have to steam them a little bit so that they can bite into them, or grate them. So that's particularly in the case of apple or carrot sticks. I do love the old apple slinky. If you've got time to slinky up an apple before they go to school, they're great because it's much easier for them to eat, and it's fun. The slinky thing is great fun. What else have we got in there? Yeah, even bananas. So some kids are quite happy just to peel a banana and eat it. Others would prefer to have it chopped up. So you'll get to know what your children prefer. Oranges, you know, peeling the oranges and cutting them up. I do love, there's one there that's called sandwich sushi. Fabulous. It just makes it fun. It's just bread. It's just a sandwich, but we're rolling it up and cutting it into little pieces. So there's those tiny little finger pieces that make it kind of fun for little fingers. So there's some ideas there for you. If anyone else has got some good ideas, chuck them in the chat box. I'd really like to see that and share them with us. And again, you've got the fact sheet there as well that you can download from the Nutrition Week website. For those of you who might have little ones that might be going to early childhood centre, factor in the considerations for under 3. So this is really those choke choke-in risks. So some of the things I mentioned earlier, like chopping up the grapes and the tomatoes, things with skin, like sausage skin, can be a little bit of a choking hazard. So just choose meat that doesn't have those skins on them. Crunchy chickpeas and fava beans are lovely, but they can be a bit of a choking hazard. So move more towards the fresh or the tinned ones or the blended ones. You're cutting up your fruit. We talked about the carrots as well. So they're just some mindful things. Avoid things like whole, well, you wouldn't have nuts. Most of them are allergy aware, but particularly popcorn can be a bit of a choking hazard, particularly for the younger ones. All right, so that's enough on tailoring lunchboxes. Again, if anyone has any tips or ideas on what they do for their little ones and what's working, particularly as we go into, you know, that as they are getting used to being at school and some new things to try, pop it in the chat box. Thanks, Alyssa's got something. My daughter loves dip, so we puree veggies with ricotta. Oh, that's beautiful. And in fact, use ricotta or even the Philly cream cheese as your carrier for other things. So mix it up. One thing I like to do is get tinned beetroot and I blitz that up with some cream cheese and it's a really yummy dip. So yeah, be a bit creative and it's pink. It's fun. Next, I wanted to talk a bit about tailoring lunch boxes. So we all have children that have their own little preferences of the sorts of things that they like, or the texture, or the flavour, the taste. There's a lot going on when it comes to food, and some of that can be overwhelming for little children. So understanding, number one, that every child's lunchbox is as unique as them, and understanding that they all have unique sensory needs and preferences. Try not to compare lunchboxes. Try not to compare how your child eats to how other children eat, because we're all such individuals. What I like, you mightn't like. What you like, I mightn't like. And that continues on into adulthood. And I think we need to respect that. So there's three main types of eaters that I'm going to talk about today. We've got our sensory seekers, we've got our sensory avoiders, and our timid taste buds. And there's a fact sheet again on that where you can download and keep that on hand, which is always a good thing to give to well-meaning family who are like, what's wrong with your child? They should be eating this. And in actual fact, it's fine. It's just how they are. And if we understand that, then we can make it work for our whole family. So our sensory seekers, we'll start with these little bubbers. So these are the kids that they love to explore the world with their senses. They're very tactile. They like to taste everything and smell everything. And they like big flavors and textures. So, you know, crunchy and chewy, squishy, spicy, tart, those kinds of flavors. These are the kids that love the Greek yogurt. They love olives. They love pickled things as well. So pickled cucumbers, cornichons. My son loves cornichons. My daughter hates them. Yeah, and pickled sliced cucumbers are fantastic. So work with those sorts of flavors and those textures in the lunchbox. Then there's other children who are the opposite. So they're your sensory avoiders. So these are the ones that don't really like touching food. They don't like getting sticky, dirty hands as well. So anything that involves having to pick up food that might be a little bit squishy, a little bit wet maybe, they're probably not that big fan of. They prefer, some of these children might prefer mild flavours and consistent textures. So they're taking a little while to get used to that texture variation. And they're the ones who also like certain flavours. So, and everything's got to be, or it could also be colours as well. They just prefer things that are kind of a beigey colour. There's a few beige eaters out there, and that's okay. That's just where they're at the moment. Textures can be quite challenging for them, as I mentioned. So crunchy things or anything that might involve having to chew a bit. They can sometimes be what we might call lazy eaters, but they just need a little bit more time. They're still learning about food. And sometimes they just are always going to be like that. So they will always be a little bit sensitive to these stronger flavors and stronger textures. And that's okay as well, because we can get around that. Many might prefer to have their food separated. So those kind of bento style boxes can actually be quite useful for these children in particular. Because they don't like to handle much food, you can get things like little picks. We call them food picks, or use like little mini chopsticks or something like that. So the little food picks are like this, and they're kind of cute. You could use, make sure you've got some implements in the lunchbox, so a fork or a spoon as well. So it's really about setting them up for success. It's not that they don't want to eat or they don't like the food. It could be, it's just that the feeling or the fact that they have to pick it up and touch it could be the thing that puts them off. So think about that. It's really interesting. And then we have those little ones that are still a little bit unsure with new foods. They're a bit averse to new foods. We call them a little bit neophobic. Don't like new things, particularly when it comes to food. So they're still learning flavors and textures. It's not that they don't like it. They just don't like it at that point. And they're still, getting used to it, and having those positive experiences around those foods is what's really important. They will gradually build their confidence to explore new foods. We have to take things slow with our timid taste buds, children. What we want to do is we always want to make sure we've got those familiar, what we call safe foods that are in the lunchbox as well, because that makes them feel like, hey, I'm familiar with this food. I know what it's going to taste like. I'll eat it, as opposed to something really new or just even something that they're not so used to having that appears in a lunchbox. It's flat out, no, I'm not going there. If you are going to be exploring some foods in a lunchbox, always put a very small amount of that new food in there. So that's what we would call our still learning food. And that's just to give them that little bit of exposure, but they don't have to eat it. So this is a really lovely diagram where, everything's pretty much known. There's just a little thing that might be new in there. That's kind of kept separated from the rest. And then they may choose to eat it or not. And if they don't eat it, it's no big deal because it's not a huge waste either. But it's something that they've at least had that exposure of. Sometimes children, they really want to try new foods, but it's just holding them back. And it can be quite challenging. I was one of those children that really had a hard time trying new foods as I was growing up. But always having those familiar foods was okay. And then every now and then I'll just try a little bit of that something new. Usually the first time round I was like, not so sure about it. But the more you expose, the more they might try, and then the more it becomes a familiar food and part of their food or lunchbox repertoire. So these little guys, they take a little bit longer, a bit more patience, but it's all fine. So if anyone has any comments or questions around what sort of child you've got that you're providing lunch boxes to, that'd be really good, because it's always nice to share how we're experiencing, the different ways that we feed our children. All right, so I did mention I was going to talk a bit about labels and knowing what to look for on labels when it comes to packaged foods, because we are always still going to get some packaged foods, let's get real, like biscuits or crackers, maybe, it could be a mixed dish that you could be getting that's pre-prepared. So good thing to do is get a bit of an idea of what to look for on the package. And I usually go just straight to the nutrition information, because that's the source of truth. And there is, of course, a fact sheet that we've got to go with this. So if you don't, if you want to keep this on hand, again, handy to print out, pop it on the fridge or whatever, and use it as your go-to guide. So when we're looking at the nutrition information panel, it can be a little bit overwhelming. It's a table, there's lots of big words, lots of numbers. What am I actually looking for here? Well, I'll give you a bit of a guide. So when we're comparing foods, we always try and compare per 100 grams of those foods, because every food item, say it's a packet of crisp bread or something, one serve is different to the other serve, depending on the brand that they use. So you always compare per 100 grams. And the main nutrients that I look out for is the saturated fat, which is that's the sort of fat, particularly that might be in processed foods like biscuits in particular, crackers, that sort of thing. They often use the type of fat can be an unhealthy fat, like a palm oil, or it could be like an animal fat, and that's saturated fat. It's not so good for our cholesterol. So you want to aim for around or less than 3 grams per 100 grams of those ones. When it comes to sugar, this is the most common one that we're looking out for. And many of you who were listening to the news last week You know, there's so many toddler foods. This is foods that are promoted for 1 and 2-year-olds, and more than half of the food itself is sugar. It's disgraceful. Yet they're trying to portray that it's a healthy option. And it's not. So this is where going past the label and all of that, those claims, is actually really quite important. The thing to look for when it comes to sugar is it's always labeled. We never really know how much of it is free sugar and how much of it is actually the natural sugar, but regardless, still sugar. So of the sugars, you want to try less than 15 grams per 100 grams is a bit of a rule of thumb. So if you're looking at, say, a muesli bar, love muesli bars, but some of them can be really sweet. So yeah, check the sugar and see if you can get one that's a little bit lower. Like some of them can be up around 50, 60 grams of sugar. It's like, no way, they might as well just have sugar. Some other things to look for: sodium. Salty foods. So you're thinking your savory crackers here in particular. What we want to look for is around less than 400 milligrams of sodium per 100 grams. So sodium is actually just the main part of the salt that can be problematic if we have too much of it in our diet. And we don't want to encourage too much of those strong salty flavors. So a lot of your sensory seekers like a lot of sweet, they like a lot of salt. So you're going to be sort of just being mindful as to how far you go with those particular foods. And then finally, fiber is another good nutrient to look for. So when it comes to fiber, you're not going to find it in things like dairy foods or meat products because they're just not a source of fiber. It's really in your whole grain, your go foods, so your grainy crackers and breads and so on. So choosing the wholemeal varieties, the whole grain options, multigrain sort of things, they're going to be higher in fiber. Looking for more than 5 grams per 100 grams is a good rule of thumb there. So hopefully that's helped just to clarify the sorts of things when you are in the biscuit aisle, the muesli bar aisle, what to look for. And there's also the health star rating, which can be helpful if we know how to use it the right way. So the health star rating has been out for quite some time now, and you know, the more stars, the more nourishing the food is going to be, the less sugary and salty and so on. But they are set based on categories. So what you see in a dairy option, you can't really compare to, say, a muesli bar or a cracker or something. So each of those categories have their own algorithm behind them as to what sort of star value they are provided. A good rule of thumb is looking for 4 or more stars. And if you do that, then most of the stuff up here in the labels has been done for you. It's been taken care of. It's acknowledged the sugar content, the sodium, and particularly the fiber and the saturated fat as well. So yeah, 4 stars or more and you're doing pretty well. Sometimes the dairy does get a little bit low, which is a bit of a shame because dairy does contain saturated fat in it. And I still recommend just have the full cream dairy, the regular cheese, yogurt. It's better to try and go with less of the sugar, then that's fine. So I always say with a caveat, the dairy might seem a little bit low, but things like your muesli bars, crackers, sweet biscuits, it's cereals as well. This health star rating can be quite useful just to, at a glance, to get those healthier options. Not all of the packaged foods will have a health star rating on them, so you can actually compare products with this marvelous app. It's actually really good, and you can download it and you just scan the barcode and it will bring up what that health star rating is of that dish or that food, and it will also provide similar products and some that might be a healthier option that you could find on the shelf. That's all I'm going to say about labels. If anyone has any questions, please pop it in the chat box. I wanted to address a very common situation where the lunchbox comes home hardly eaten at all. So expect that. It's fine. It's a normal part of growing up. Sometimes kids just aren't hungry and they're not going to eat much from their lunchbox, or they're busy. So these are the considerations we have to take into account as to why it could be coming home uneaten. Was there too much food in the first place? So did we overwhelm them with a little bit much? that sort of put them off, or there was just too much, like they just weren't even hungry. They didn't have the appetite for all that food. I have seen some parents feel like they've just got to put more in, and thinking that if they put more in, then at least the children will have more choice and then they'll choose something. Sometimes that just backlashes and it just costs you more money as well. Maybe there were too many new foods. Maybe you've got one of those sensitive, timid taste buds and it's like too much going on here, I can't deal with it. So they'll just be no right from the outset. Could they access the food? Was there some of those little hard to access foods, like, you know, the tins that couldn't be opened or a container that couldn't be opened? Maybe the fruit was just a little bit too hard, couldn't bite into it. So how that was prepared. And then something that's out of our control, it's really back to the school, is have they got time to sit down and eat? Does the school allow them opportunities to sit with their friends, sit in a you know, somewhat civilized space, to open their lunchbox and actually eat their food and allow them that time to respect the food as well? I know that children just want to go out playing and skip food altogether. So yeah, that's really something also to be mindful of. At the end of the day, you've just got to really trust their internal sense of appetite. Know that they will eat the right amount to grow well. Children's bodies are very good at telling them when they're hungry and when they need to eat, and we've got to trust that. We might think they haven't eaten enough, but they will know when they've had enough. It's really important that we trust that internal appetite that they have. And there's a fact sheet there as well that you can get from the website. Other factors to think about when it comes to making our little ones' lunchbox is try to include them as much as possible. So this goes for everything when it comes to meals and food. Getting them, bringing them along shopping, helping them to choose what fruit they would like in their lunchbox, and picking off the grocery what they choose. Cooking, preparing food. So if you have time on the weekend to prep some lunchbox foods, bring them into the kitchen as well, get them to help out. And then the more that they're involved in that actual food preparation, the more they might have some interest in wanting to eat those foods and be really keen to pack those foods in a lunchbox. So help get them involved in packing the lunchbox as well. So that could be that. What's always a good thing is having that variation at home. Here's our lunchbox choices today. These are the types of fruit. These are the types of pre-prepped, you know, baked products. These are the sandwich fillings. Now, what would you like to put in? What will we have today? Tell me which ones you want. And then they have that agency and around what goes in their lunchbox, and they actually might be more enthused around eating the foods that they then take to school. Simple tasks like filling up their the drink bottle, like out of the tap, or drink, you know, the fridge drink dispenser or whatever, popping some ice cubes in the drink bottle, fun little things like that, just getting them engaged. And it's part of that routine as well, before school starts. Now, because we're in summer, but it doesn't matter what time of the year, we've got to make sure that the lunchboxes are kept safe and we don't allow bacteria to grow. So many of those, what we call the grow foods, bacteria will also grow in those grow foods in particular. So that's your dairy and your meat products in particular. So those are we need to keep those foods cold, really, really important. And any fruits and vegetables that are chopped up become more hazardous as well. So using your insulated containers, I love the insulated lunch boxes. There's so many options you can get now. Having an ice brick to keep it cold, or like I mentioned, if you've got little milk poppers, freeze those and pop those into the lunchbox. It keeps everything lovely and cold as well. And just make sure everything's kept really clean, because bacterial contamination is the other thing. We don't have clean containers to begin with. What lovely fresh food we put in there, bacteria can grow, is already there, and it can grow a lot more quickly as well. So they're just some basic tips when it comes to food safety around lunch boxes. And there's a fact sheet that you can access. And then I wanted to just address food allergies, because there are many children that do live with the food allergy, whether it's a serious anaphylaxis type allergy or not. It's really important that you talk to the school about that allergy, and they're aware of it and they know how to manage it if the child is exposed. Many schools are what we call allergy aware schools, and in those instances, usually things like nuts would be the main thing that the school would encourage parents to not put in the lunchbox. Beyond nuts, it actually does get quite challenging. So if you have a child that has, say, egg or milk allergy, to expect everyone else in that class to avoid putting those items in their children's lunchbox is actually really a bit out of reach. And in those situations, sometimes the child has to sort of sit a little bit aside, but not away from the other children, but the teacher would be keeping an eye on them and making sure there's no risk of cross-contamination or sharing of lunchbox items either. And some really good information where you can go. There's lots of great the Allergy and Anaphylaxis Australia, a really good organisation where you can go to get some more information around this. They work with schools, they work with parents as well, and there's a great fact sheet that you can access that I've just highlighted here on the screen, and their website is allergyfacts.org.au. So it just gives you those prompts, you know, what you need, what questions you need to ask, what needs to be given to the school, and what to expect from the school. You know, for instance, every year, I'm sure it's across many of the schools that many you send your children to, I get it, is the medical information form, and you just you fill that out, and then if your child has an anaphylaxis reaction to food, then there will be an extra form that you have to fill out, and that's usually provided by ASPIA. So that's like an action plan in case the child is exposed to those allergenic foods. So yeah, there are places to go, I guess, is the main point, and seek that support and advice. And the schools will have to work with you with your child that has allergies. So putting it all together. So these are just some real basic lunchbox pictures. Keeping it real, I think, is the main thing. We've got our main item, our fruit and vegetable option, and then the other little snacky thing there. This is actually probably, I actually think this is big for, I'll take out maybe 2 items from these lunch boxes to make it suit a little kindy child. Some children, they might like that much food. And it's really important just to factor in at what stage of growth they're at. And when they're going through a growth spurt, they're going to be wanting to eat a lot. And then they'll go through a plateau of their growth, and suddenly the appetite drops off. So it's just sort of, the world is like up and down when it comes to children's appetite. So more information, there's the National Lunchbox Week website. So all those fact sheets that I was showing you during the session, you can access them there. There's also lots of recipes, which we love, and things you can make on the weekends to have in advance of the week. So some of those things might be okay in a container in the pantry. Others you could wrap up and pop them in the freezer, so they're just grab and go items. Yeah, so do check it out. That'll be your go-to guide, I think, over the year. And finally, does anyone have any questions? I noticed that nobody else has put anything in the chat box. So if anyone has any questions at this point, feel free to either type it in the chat box, or maybe you can raise your hand and we can listen to what you have to say, or even any comments that you might like to share at this point.
Thanks so much, Leanne. We have got a couple of questions. They're coming up in the Q&A, which I'm not sure if you can see, but I will read them out. I love the go, glow, grow. I feel like that's a mantra for us all. So firstly, we had 2 on sort of dried fruits and sultanas in particular. So there's one around what's your view on sultanas? It's quite high in sugar, but it's quite a very popular food. And then another one asking around how the sugar 15 gram per 100 gram sort of works with dried fruits like sultanas.
Oh, great question. Actually, I should have addressed the fruit and the sugar content. So I don't have a problem with sultanas. What I do have a problem is if they eat them all day, every day, because they do stick to the teeth. So the main problem with a lot of the dried fruits is they can stick to the teeth a little bit. So make it, if you've got a variety of food. So I usually have, if we have sultanas, have a bit of cheese because the cheese kind of cleans and provides a coating on the teeth afterwards. Um, and I think that sultanas are a really handy thing to pop in the lunchbox as well because they don't go off either. They're a good source of fibre and lots of minerals. Yes, they do have lots of natural sugars in them, obviously, because it's made of fruit and all of the moisture's gone from the fruit. So what's left is the fibre and the sugar. So absolutely 100%. I wouldn't be reading label. Don't read the sugar content of fruit. Because fruit naturally contains sugar. So it's perfectly fine. You'll find that the sultanas are about half sugar by the time all of the water comes out. Much better than many of the highly processed sugary snacks that are out there, because you are getting some fibre and some nutrients from those dried fruits. But like I said, probably doesn't have to go in the lunchbox every day. Maybe you could have a couple of times a week, just as another option that you can resort to. I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
So, we've got another one around food safe times in summer versus winter. Would you recommend doing things differently in summer or winter when it comes to safe food storage?
Uh, Obviously, the heat will get to the food quicker in summer. When it comes to food safely, we have this rule, we call it the 2 hour, 4 hour rule. And so depends on how well the food has been looked after before it even got in the lunchbox. So if you had leftovers from a buffet party the night before that had been out for 2 hours, know that that food, when it gets to the lunchbox, it's going to actually be at room temperature for a long period of time as well. So it could become hazardous. So we usually say no longer than 4 hours out of the fridge. So if you make something fresh, might be a sandwich, or you might have made it the night before and left it in the fridge. As soon as it comes out of the fridge, really, they kind of need to be consuming that within 4 hours. And most of them probably would by the time lunchtime came around. Having the ice block or something cold in there helps to keep it cooler for longer and helps to slow down the bacterial growth. It's not going to stop the bacterial growth because as soon as it comes out of the fridge and it's above 5 degrees, bacteria will start to grow. So obviously in summer, the bacteria will grow faster, but we still apply that 4 hour rule. So try to consume it within the 4 hours since it's out of the fridge. And other things to be mindful of, I think in winter, things like thermoses are great as well. So having hot food in a thermos, again, once it gets below 60 degrees, that's when the bacteria can start to grow. So if you've got hot steaming food, you pop it in a thermos, the temperature will decrease, obviously, over that time. But if it's still from when it's from cooked, and when it gets to, you're never going to know when it reaches 60 degrees, but it's again that 4 hour rule principle as well. So at the end of the day, if it's still a little bit warm, but it's not hot, chuck it out. So yeah, there's just some principles, and a really good guide is that 4 hour rule. Try and consume, particularly those high hazardous foods or those risky foods earlier in the lunchbox, earlier in the day. Yeah.
Yeah, so that sort of touches on another one around any tips on what to or what not to pack on extremely hot days. Are you saying maybe instruct your little one to eat maybe the dairy stuff at snack time? Is that what
Yeah,
you
if they can, but they're still going to choose what to eat when they want. I think the best thing to do is stick to those insulated lunch boxes and something frozen in there, and you should be fine. Be mindful of some of those really higher risk foods like egg sandwiches, chicken sandwiches, because we know bacteria just absolutely thrives in those ones. Yeah, so that would probably be my best advice.
Yeah, yeah, and that touches. We've got a lot on food safety here. What about sushi? How long can that stay in a lunchbox while it's still
Yeah.
safe?
Yep, 4 hours. Use 4 hours. So it's a high risk food. Once the rice is cooked, it becomes very high risk food, and bacteria loves growing in cooked rice. So if you're making up some sushi, you make it the night before, keep it in the fridge, take it out, as long as they consume it within 4 hours is important. And any leftover sushi, do not save for the next day. That really needs to be tossed out or given to the chooks or whatever. And yeah, so that's I think, again, we're trying to keep it as cool as possible to slow down the growth of bacteria. Then it's going to be safer.
Yeah, and that probably applies, might bring up another question around, I'm a bad one for like making a quiche and then we eat most of it for dinner, but then the leftovers might be sitting there to cool. And then, you do the dishes and you're like, oh, it's been sitting out for a little bit. That you'd add that time that it's been sitting out to however long.
Yep, it's a cumulative thing. So another rule of thumb with 2 hour, 4 hour rule comes into it is if you're intending to use some of those leftovers for lunchbox the next day, get them into the fridge as soon as possible. If it's been left out for more than 2 hours, so if your leftovers have been left out for more than 2 hours, so you had a barbecue or you made a quiche and it came out of the oven and it was like 6 o'clock and it's like 8:30 and it's still sitting on the bench, the leftovers, don't put that in the lunchbox the next day. So yeah, so anything that's been left out for more than 2 hours with the intention, so those leftovers with the intention to be used the next day, you chuck it out. Has to be put in the fridge within 2 hours, right?
Yeah.
So, and
As
then
soon as it stops steaming, like
pretty
where's your,
much.
yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. So just portion it out, put it in whatever the containers, and allow it to finish steaming, and then into the fridge. And that's making sure that it's kept safe as possible. Brings that temperature down, prevents the bacterial growth. So then when you pop it in the lunchbox the next day, you don't have as much bacteria from that start point. So there's less of a risk for it to get to such dangerous levels, if that makes sense.
Yeah. We've got a question on deli meats. Are they nutritious at all?
Deli meat. Oh, is that? I'm guessing that might be like Devon and ham and Strasburgy type stuff, salami. Sometimes it's okay to make things nourishing, not nourishing, to make it tasty. It's not really the most nourishing option because they're really high in salt. They have a lot of preservatives in them as well, and they're usually pretty fatty, like really saturated fats as well. So I don't usually encourage them as an everyday, always in the lunchbox type thing, but every now and then, sometimes I would give my son a salami wrap with lots of salad in there because it helped him to enjoy that wrap and the salad with it. But it was never anything I would have every day. So I might just get a packet, and when it runs out, and I might not get it till next term, for instance. So again, think in moderation, think in balance, but not such a reliance on those sorts of foods like Devon in the sandwich every day, because they're tasty because they're so salty and fatty, but they're really not that good for our body. Yeah. Hope that answers that. It's like not no, but occasionally, and if you're going to have it in something that's actually going to give some nutritional value as well.
Perfect. We've got another one saying, if a child likes a food like pasta, is there a risk that she'll get sick of it if I give it to her every single day? Is it more likely to be a success if we mix it up?
Oh, you know what? If they're asking for it every day, give it to them every day because it's a food that they're really liking at the moment. Kids go through phases, and you just got to ride those phases. And if you decide, no, I'm not going to give it to you, you've already had too much of it, then they're going to become grumpy and it's not fair. And there's nothing wrong with pasta. So let them have it every day. Don't feel that you're going to wear it out its welcome, because that's normal anyway. That's a normal thing. We go through phases, and just be ready for your next one to come through, because then it's going to be couscous salad, and then it's going to be Vegemite sandwiches, and then it's going to be the sushi, and you just know that there's these other options out there when they do get sick of the pasta. But whilst they're enjoying it, enjoy the fact that they've got something that they're onto, and it makes life easier because you know what to pack.
Perfect. We're running out of time, but we've got two last questions and then we might wrap up. So one quickly, is it safe to put frozen muffins or pasta in the lunchbox? And will they defrost by lunch?
Oh, usually I've never actually oh no, you could freeze the pasta. Sometimes what happens when the pasta thaws out, it gets a little bit sloppy. and breaks up a bit and might not be that nice. So where your children might love pasta, but they'll be like, yeah, but not in the lunchbox and not that thought out pasta. So be mindful of how it is when you have it the next day thought out. Things like muffins are great. So I love, that was my biggest thing, is I would always make sort of savory muffins or fruit muffins, or I'll do like little scrolly type things. Even scones, you know, in the freezer, pop them in the lunchbox the morning of, and they should be thawed out. Yeah, they should be thawed out. I mean, if you've also got an ice box next to it, it takes a bit longer. Use that frozen element as the ice box. So whatever you happen to have frozen in that goes into the lunchbox helps to keep everything else cool. So yeah, maybe on those days you don't need that frozen block or whatever in there.
Perfect. I think we might have to wrap it up here. We're out of time. But thank you so much, Leanne, and thank you everyone for joining us. We've got a quick poll that hopefully should come up in the next little bit while I read out the last couple of sentences. Now I've lost my notes. We'll send you an email with all the resources that Leanne has mentioned today, as well as an evaluation to help us improve and plan for future events like this. We hope you enjoyed this one. And then the link to the evaluation will also come up in the chat if you're a do it now kind of person. But a big thanks to Leanne and Nutrition Australia, as well as our partnering councils in Kingston, Knox, Manningham and Maroondah to help put this one on. But thanks everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Alyssa. Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.